So next session, we're going to do more work on peace and conflict in this plenary.
How good was that session? I mean, I think, to be able to get two people who once upon a time were basically trying to kill each other to sit on a stage and say, here's what we've learned, and here's how you can take that and share that message. And I think, we've been very lucky. It's obviously completely designed and planned, but the bids that work out as being the best bids every year, we always seem to end up being in the moment. So whether it was the US election when we were in Pittsburgh, whether it was the very sad end of Mandela's life last year in Johannesburg, but that made it such a pertinent time to be there, or the fact that there is way, way, way too much conflict going on in the world, and that's a lesson that Dublin, and Ireland can teach us all. So the next plenary... Last
night, so just following on from that, because we've skipped through the stats, which is fine, that's fine. Just last night, Daniel Buritica, who's from Colombia, he and Regis came over to speak to me and David, and he was saying when we called Daniel and said to him, we need you to go and make a friend with someone in the FARC and find them and bring them to Dublin. He said, Kate, you always ask us such hard things to do, but this was the hardest thing, and now I've met my best friend. So there you go, it's a wonderful story. And the delegate from Syria, who said, everything I heard from Sean and Jackie, I'm taking it back to Syria. There has to be a way. And this wonderful delegate from Mali, who said, I'm not going to let the One Young World family down. I'm taking it home. So a wonderful thing. So topic for this plenary, how can young people, i.e. you, how can you drive the reconciliation process? So let's welcome the councillors.
So first up, we have the founder of Kanchi, disability activist Caroline Casey.
Look at you. You look grand. And One Young World's very own astronaut, Twitter tag, @AstroRon, Ron Garan.
Woo!
Nice to see you again.
Founder of Ella's Kitchen, the social entrepreneur's advocate, and a fantastic councillor returning for the second year, Paul Lindley.
From the UK and YouGov returning councillor, the tireless friend of One Young World, Carol Stone.
And you've just met him with his beautiful photographs of Mandela, Matthew Willman.
And one of the most watched news anchors in the world, a UN Goodwill AIDS ambassador, James Chow. Okay, and let us bring on the delegates of the Peace and Conflict Resolution session. Delegates, please welcome them. Go, guys. Bless her. She looks gorgeous. Introducing your delegate.
Okay, well, I have the great honor to introduce Jennifer Kamara. And Jennifer, the reason I am so delighted to have met her, this girl is a dangerous dreamer. A dangerous dreamer whose family to her is very important because her father Samuel encouraged her to dream. Her brother David pushed her hard. Her mum Valentina tried to ground her because she's a rebel and she was known as Rebella. This girl is a change maker. She is the CEO and founder of World Health Equity. This organization is only 1 year old, or just beyond it. And in that time, she has affected the lives of 25,000 people, 38 mothers, and still finds the time to campaign for Ebola. I'm asking you today, she has a blog out on One Young World and the Huffington Post, and please get behind her for that campaign. This girl is relentless. And key to everything she does is partnership. She believes in innovation and technology, of course, but partnership. Only progress will happen with people. And when you see this girl smile, nobody could refuse her. And I asked her what her dreams were. And aside from the big dream of being able to provide a solution for the global health for vulnerable people, there's a secret too. This girl wants to have an album for R&B music. Remember, every leader here has many aspects to them, and this girl is going to be around a long time, dancing, singing, and creating change. Jennifer Kamara.
Wow, it's such an incredible honor to be here with you all today. Thank you. Thank you, Caroline, for that revealing introduction. Today, there are 44 distinct conflicts recorded worldwide. The state of violence in the world has grown to be twice as grave as it was 10 years ago. Let us pause for a moment to ask ourselves why. Everywhere, from the Middle East to the Far East, from West Africa to South America, we, the millennial generation, are asking for basic needs: food, shelter, clothing, a better internet connection, maybe. We all need health, education, the ability to earn an honest living. If these needs go unmet, there will be conflict because people will fight over them. To truly foster peace, our basic rights have to be met. Growing up in coup d'etat-ridden Sierra Leone, I've seen some of the worst of what conflict can bring. At age 7, when many girls play outside, I experienced strangers covered in masks and holding AK-47s, cornering my parents and I in our living room. They demanded everything dear to my father, including my mother and I. Over the next 9 years, my parents focused on rebuilding our lives. They rebuilt our home, which had been set ablaze. Nationwide, thousands who were injured from the war went without medical care. My father, a general surgeon, saw patients in some of the direst conditions you can imagine. He salvaged their health, and with that, their ability to rebuild their own lives. One night, as I studied by candlelight, it dawned on me. My father's work, rebuilding Sierra Leone through healing, was in essence peacekeeping at its most rudimentary. His commitment to protecting health, a human right that is key to fostering reconciliation, was the reason that the rebels had spared my mother and I. So my father showed me the value of channeling anger and destruction into being shamelessly constructive. But in addition to focusing on the positive, we must believe in ourselves. When I graduated in engineering 2 years ago and discovered that I wanted to have an impact in healthcare, I didn't have the money or the contacts or resources to do so. Nevertheless, I found a way, and so can you. In my case, incredibly supportive family, friends, and employer, Novartis at the time, helped me realize a dream I had doubted for 3 years. If you don't currently have that support group, forge one, starting with you, and count me in too. I founded World Health Equity a 1.5 years ago with an ambitious goal: to help mitigate the health disparities facing the world's vulnerable. This year, with the Sierra Leone Ministry of Health, we, World Health Equity, set up a pilot clinic that has established medical care for 25,000 people who previously lacked access to a hospital. The clinic has seen 10% of the local population for diseases like typhoid and malaria, preventable and curable conditions that used to cost lives. In addition, with the Sierra Leone Ministry of Health and Boston's Massachusetts General Hospital, World Health Equity set up a maternal health program that oversees 3,000 monthly births and has saved 38 mothers in 10 months and counting. Separately, thank you. Separately, with a fellow One Young World ambassador and friends from 70 countries, we founded the Ebola Challenge movement, which has raised over $8,500 toward MSF Ebola response efforts in 4 weeks. If there's something I have learned in the past 2 years, it is that our world may be beaten and bruised, our generation may be young and inexperienced, but we can affect the world around us, and we must. We millennials raised over $100 million toward ALS research through social media. We hold immense power as the most disruptive generation yet, and we can rally and drive reconciliation. As with all crazy ideas, like starting World Health Equity for me, there will be those that are against it. You will all have an uncle or a friend who will tell you you're foolish, idealistic. But identify a basic right that you are passionate about improving in your country, be it health, education, equality, and do it anyway. Because those that are years experienced say that in 20 years, you're more likely to regret the things you didn't do. I know I could have started World Health Equity 3 years earlier and affected the lives of so many more. Don't wait. Thank you.
So I have the great honor, and I hope I'm up to the challenge of introducing Solomia Bobrovska, because it's really going to be hard in a very short amount of time to speak in a way that I think Solomia deserves of her vast accomplishments and the brave work that she's doing. Conflict and war are humanity's greatest failures, and I think military intervention is the last resort, if at all. And I think we have areas all around the world right now that are suffering from conflict, but it's in humanity's greatest failure that I think we see some of the shyness, the biggest spark, the biggest light, the biggest positive aspect of humanity, and I think Solomia is exemplifying that. And in her young life, she's done many things that brought her to this point. She is a distinguished scholar. She has a very in-depth academic background. She's been volunteering in her community in Ukraine for over 12 years now. And because of her accomplishments, she was recognized by the Vice Prime Minister of Ukraine, and she's assistant to the Vice Prime Minister. And when conflict and chaos came to her homeland, she needed to do something about it. And she has been very involved with trying to alleviate the suffering that the people of Ukraine are experiencing. Everything from helping to find missing people. She had to personally identify or notify families that they lost loved ones, seeking justice. She was an ear and a place where people can go that had nowhere else to turn, that were seeking justice. And Solomia knows that in any violent conflict, what usually happens, or almost always happens, is a downward spiral of increasing and escalating violence. And she also knows that the only truly sustainable way to overcome that and to reverse that cycle is through the most powerful force in the universe, which is forgiveness and reconciliation. But knowing that and being able to do that are two different things, because although it is the most powerful force in the universe, it's very, very difficult, and it's only possible during fleeting moments of opportunity, fleeting moments where it is possible to have true reconciliation and forgiveness, and there's many steps that have to go into that, and she's working towards all those steps, and just doing amazing, amazing work. And at 6 o'clock tomorrow, Solomia is going to get back on a plane and go to Ukraine and continue her work, and so it is my greatest honor to introduce you to Solomia and to hear her story.
Ukraine has been dealing with war, death, and tears for more than 10 months now. History repeats itself. We experienced similar conflicts during World War I and World War II, when Ukraine was divided between two empires. Not so long ago, we thought we had learned how to forgive and what reconciliation is. I'm here to ask you to support Ukrainian people in finding that peace again. Ukrainian protests for truly independence began in November 2013. By February, we paid price the lives of the ordinary people, of men and women, now to be remembered as the Heaven 100. They were killed by the regime. This led to a foreign invasion in the east and south of Ukraine, and war broke out. We are here talking about reconciliation and peace after conflict, but a lot of you already know that there is no universal recipe for this. Healing the wounds of families who have lost their loved ones is next to impossible. Although time heals, the pain disappears very slowly. Yes, we can and should use the experience of those countries who have had similar long-running conflicts and found reconciliation. But having just returned from the front line by myself, it feels it's too early to speak about reconciliation. Whilst we find on, there is no time to forgive, because you don't know who will betray you tomorrow. Yet, in the midst of Ukrainian crisis, humanity exists. Volunteers help the army, work in hospitals, collect money, and more. There is a movement that turns the country and shows soldiers at the front that we are caring about them. In July, I started Aid to State Bodyguard Service in Ukraine initiative on Facebook. Almost every week, we receive packages and food and necessary stuff for bodyguards. In 3 months, we collected more than 70,000 Ukrainian hryvnias. I take packages to the combat areas whenever I can, staying with the bodyguards, listening to their stories. Many of them are farmers, engineers, drivers, shop workers, even businessmen. They are ordinary people as you and me. They see they are not forgotten. Other volunteers help the wounded in the military hospitals. Through the Euromaidan SOS initiative, we maintain a list of killed and missing militaries. We take this list to PASE and OSCE sessions to show them that the Russian Federation is a combating party, and to record accusation of human rights violations by the separatists and Russian invaders. I hope for and want that this war will end soon. But then we will have to face those Ukrainians who took arms against us. I ask you, how do we do that? It's difficult for us to find dialogue for reconciliation, and we do not even have a common language, and as we see, values, unfortunately. I have always admired Ireland. If we look at its history, we have many things in common: anger, common sorrow, courage, dignity, the will of freedom. Ireland and Northern Ireland have come a long way down the path of reconciliation. They know how to forgive. After many years, they have peace. It's an ability that comes with time, understanding, and revelation what's important. Right now, I feel it's too early to reconcile or to forgive. But I know for sure that we will need this soon. That's why I came, to learn from Ireland's history. Reconciliation is hard. It's too hard. Ukraine needs to learn how to reconcile the differences between neighbors. I'm here to ask all you countries, help us find peace again. War brings nothing but tears, death, and devastation. Help us finding this lasting peace again. Thank you on behalf of all Ukrainian people.
I'm very, very proud to introduce an amazing children's rights defender here in Eddie Mokosi. Now, there are times in our lives, I think, where we know we've met somebody special. It may be that our heart's thumping because we've just met somebody that we'd like to be a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or that we've just seen someone achieve absolute adversity and win at the Olympics or the Paralympics, and that puts a smile on our face. Or it might be that we've just heard a speech, or we'll hear a speech in the next half an hour that really puts a lump in our throat. But I had that special moment 6 months ago when I first met Eddie at the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, where Eddie was living in a one-roomed house, and we talked for about 2 hours as we walked through the rubbish-strewn streets and dusty avenues of Kakuma. And he told me his story. He told me about Congo, his homeland, where there's a children's parliament, which is really effective, actually. And at 14 years old, he decided he needed to put some things right about his fellow children in the Congo, and he was elected to that parliament. And over the next 3 years, he did so much work reconciling families that had been torn apart by natural disasters and man-made disasters. And at the age of 17, he was elected the leader of that parliament. And in the run-up to the 2011 general election in the Congo, he was instrumental in creating a Children's Act to protect children against being drafted into the army and being used for political purposes. And after the election, the politicians didn't actually implement many of the things that Eddie had helped put together. So he spoke up about it, and eventually had to flee the country. And he had to go via Rwanda to Uganda and ended up in this single room in Kakuma. And in these last 6 months since we first met, Eddie's applied to come here, applied to speak, applied to share his story with you guys. He's moved to Nairobi and now works for a fantastic charity called Film Aid, where he works in the slums of Kibera, teaching children about their rights and trying to improve their lives. So I'd love to put your hands together to introduce my friend, your speaking delegate, Eddie Mokosi.
Can't believe I'm here. Thank you, Paul, for this amazing introduction. And thank you, Kate and David, for this amazing work. One Young World is a real, true family. Thank you very much. Good morning and peace profound to all of you. Thank you, One Young World, for this chance to share my story. I am Eddie Musoke Daniel, 22 years old, born and brought up in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country at war since 1997. At the age of 9, the volcano Nyiragongo erupted and destroyed my town. We had to flee to Rwanda. I saw children homeless and separated from their families. I saw women giving birth alone. I saw many upsetting scenes. To support the many homeless children, the young people from my town, Goma, my province, North Kivu, created the Children's Parliament. I joined in 2005, age 13. 4 years later, I became the president of the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo Children's Parliament. At this time, 3 rebel groups operated in Congo. They were enrolling children into their armies. Thousands of kids were being killed. Women were sexually abused. Dozens of peace conventions and agreements were signed. Nothing changed. Tribes were fighting, accusing each other of supporting the rebels. The question was how to reunite the country and live together as one nation. As the president, I focus on children's rights, conflict resolution, and promoting peace. We lobbied the ministers of child protection, Minister of Justice, Minister of Youth. To improve children's rights, the National Assembly created and adopted the Child Protection Act of the Democratic Republic of Congo in January 2009. And we brought reconciliation to nearly 5,000 families. In 2011, during the country's general elections, children were again forced into rebel armies. I created the Zero Child campaign. In 1 week, we encouraged 400 children, some as young as 13, to return their electoral and political party cards back to the authorities. We did not want to ask them to give up their right to vote or their party membership. But holding onto these documents meant they would lose the protection of the national and international community. But 149 children were recruited to the battlefield, and 7 were killed during the fighting. I criticized the politicians and rebel leaders for allowing the illegal use of child soldiers and delivered a report at a national press conference about the children's involvement. I then became a political and kidnap target and had to flee my country for Kenya. My new life started, a refugee life. Hopeless, smileless, lonely. At the refugee camp Kakuma, I joined FilmAid, who used the power of film to inform and make people smile again. I promoted human rights through outreach programs, sharing my knowledge and experience with over 3,000 other refugees through training programs and workshops. I also led the Do Good, Feel Good project, focusing on fighting gender-based violence in the camp. Peace is not a familiar word to many refugees. I wish the gun was a pen and the bullet a pencil. I wish there were more educated people and far fewer refugees. And use these things to resolve peacefully our differences for the sake of the children. But through all my experiences, I've learned that peace starts with you and me, right here within us. So I challenge you all, if a young child, a 17-year-old boy, can stand up to rebels, to politicians, and to death threats for the sake of human rights, just think what you, the educated, connected, and inspired people in this room can achieve together. Let's act to preserve children's lives and freedoms. Many thanks.
Well, I'm delighted to say this is my 5th time. This is my 5th summit. I've been in at the beginning, and I was in... I was in tears this morning. I was sitting next to my husband listening to the people talking about the Northern Ireland conflict. And partly it was tears of sadness, but mostly it was tears of pride to be involved and to hear such people as you, the delegates. And I think this year the delegates, the ambassadors, have moved me more than any year. So I'm very, very pleased to be here and to be introducing one of the delegates here today. He's 19 years old. He's from Bangor in Northern Ireland, 2nd year at Bath University in the United Kingdom, reading international relations and politics. He's chair of the Amnesty International at his university. He's looking after or working with a peace and reconciliation here, or not here, but in Northern Ireland. And also he's very, very much going off to Pretoria next year to work with Lawyers for Human Rights. Now, this is quite an achievement, but this is a very self-effacing man. He's someone who says often we don't realize our own sense of power and that he's just doing stuff that we can all do. But do we? Well, here in this hall, I think a lot of us do. But really, he's saying he believes in citizenships. He believes in us exchanging ideas. That's the way we learn. That's the way we can make a difference in the world. And he's touched my heart because as someone who was devoted to my late mother, this man says that much of his compassion and what he believes in comes from his mother. So a huge welcome to Alex Poley.
2014 marks the 20th anniversary of the first IRA ceasefire, which triggered the Northern Irish peace process. This, as you know, signalled the end of the 30-year conflict known as the Troubles, which set those who would have Northern Ireland become part of a united Ireland against those who would have it remain in the United Kingdom in a cycle of needless violence. I am of the first generation to grow up free from the immediate fear of bombs and bullets. And this achievement cannot be understated. However, I am frustrated. I am frustrated with the fact that many inside and outside of our society seem to think that Northern Ireland is no longer relevant in the conflict discourse. Many seem to think that because we have a peace settlement, it follows that we should have peace. But we do not have true peace. The Troubles rage on in the hearts and minds of our communities. Our schooling system is still divided along religious lines, and each summer we still bite our lips, praying that the yearly marching season does not erupt into violence and rioting. Our society is still mired in sectarianism. By sectarianism, I mean the reciprocal bigotry and mistrust felt towards each other by members of the Republican/Catholic community and the Protestant loyalist community. A great deal more needs to be done if Northern Ireland is to become a truly stable society. And this begs the question, as young people, what can we do? Well, the first thing that we must do is recognize that division is built upon fear. When you grow up in a society where you are judged and treated differently for what you are instead of who you are, flags and sectarian symbols provide a feeling of safety and belonging. If we are going to create agents of change, peacemakers, we must first create spaces where people can come face to face with each other without fear. And when I talk about safe spaces, I mean spaces that do not belong to a particular group or tribe, which are neutral and negotiable. Safe spaces are free from flags, murals, music, or religious institutions that include one at the expense of the other. They are hospitable, open, and friendly. But how can we actually set about creating such an environment? Well, to start with, it can be as simple as making someone a hot drink, a tea, or a coffee. That might sound absurd to you, but I'm very serious. Let me explain. For the last 3 months, I have volunteered for an amazing organisation called the Coromila Community. This is a residential centre on the north coast of Ireland which tries to create safe spaces. Groups of people who are affected by sectarianism come to stay. We make them feel welcome. We feed them. We talk to them. We listen to them. We worship with them. We make them cups of tea. We greet hostility with hospitality. For me, the effect is tangible and inspiring. This summer, I worked with a group of 40 or so young people, all of whom came from hotbeds of sectarianism and violence. The aim of the programme was to encourage youth to think about what kept them in their communities and what kept others out. It was called the In-Out programme. And over the course of a week residential, I saw young men and women who would traditionally see each other as enemies come together in sincere friendship, teaching each other about their values and their backgrounds. And they were only able to do this because they felt safe. They were on nobody's territory. And more so, they began to vocalize their frustration with division amongst their communities, that they couldn't walk in particular areas or go to particular cafes. You could see the image of a better, more inclusive society forming in their minds. And we mustn't overstate the effect of a single residential. But when you consider that Coromila hosts over 10,000 people a year, you begin to realize what an effect you can have. And there is still more to do. The reconciliation process cannot be contained in a single centre. You have to go out into communities and do the work on the ground. One way that Coromila is doing this is through a programme called Facing Our Histories, which helps train teachers to confidently facilitate controversial discussions about the past in the classroom. And this is my challenge to you, ambassadors. Go out and create safe spaces, not just as institutions, but in your day-to-day actions and with the language that you use. Greet hostility with hospitality. And if we can do that, then perhaps we can just start to build a future with each other. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have the extreme honor of introducing to you my good friend, my boy from home, Malongabong Mqaba. Malongabong lives near me outside of the great city of Durban on the east coast of Southern Africa. This man is an incredible man. I just want to honor you today. What your story and what you are doing is way more than I have experienced in my life as a young South African. Ladies and gentlemen, Malongabong, which actually means to praise, it's an incredible name that I love to say over and over again. But Malongabong comes from a township, a favela, just north of Durban, called Lindelani. It is part of a bigger township or community of informal settlements called KwaMashu. This is a community rife in many issues of HIV and AIDS, poverty, violence, drugs, gang-related issues. And here we have, sitting within our midst today, a young man who transcended all of those issues. This young man is one of the greatest fighters I have ever met. A man who, when he heard he had the opportunity to come here to One Young World, fought like I've never seen anyone fight, to be able to have the opportunity to be here, to get out there, to convince people to help support him to be here today. I can't wait to hear what you're going to say. This young man wrote a book on his smartphone. It's incredible. This young man has inspired over 12,000 young Zulus, young aspirant leaders in these township areas. His particular ability is to inspire, is to create change where there are in hopeless situations. When we have young adults today facing many issues which are far beyond their years of consideration, of dealing with, and here we have Malongabong, 28 years old, who, by the way, does not earn an income. He does not work for money. He works for the passion and the hope of what Mandela strove for in South Africa today is to get out there and change lives. This man is my hero, and let us please all put our hands together to welcome Malongabong.
It's truly an honor to be here. And I would like us to clap hands for my counselor. Really amazing person. I'd like to tell everyone that I am a Zulu man. I am a proud Zulu man. And one thing that I also want to share is that it's an honor for me to be introduced by a person 20 years ago who was called my enemy. In our country, white people were called our enemies. So I'm really proud. And for me, there's a lot of things that we don't talk about South Africa, and one of them is the political violence that happened in South Africa. And here is my story. 16 years ago in my community, there was a political war. 2 political leaders fighting just to take leadership. And from that day, my community has never been the same. Thousands of lives were lost and friends became enemies. 16 years has passed, but people are still in pain in my community. 70% of the population is under the age of 35, and 73% recorded as unemployed. And only about 4% have a post-high school qualification. We recently celebrated 20 years of democracy in South Africa. People were celebrating their freedom, but in my community, people are still holding on the past. Kids aged 12 and 13 have to take care of themselves after losing their parents in the war. I and the Salvation Army help over 2,000 young orphans with clothing and food. After our visits, there was no progress. We were just giving them temporary solutions. These young people are vulnerable. They're willing to do anything, even if it's illegal, just to get their next meal. Some even end up in prison. One thing that I've realized is that you cannot deal with any of these issues without dealing with the past hurts, the inner conflict these young people have. And one of the key principles I teach is that love is our natural state, and the light is the same in all of us. In January 2010, I started a movement called Youth with a Brighter Future to help young people deal with their past, their pain caused by war, conflict, and to undo the hatred caused by apartheid teaching. I worked with young people all over South Africa, Swaziland, and Lesotho. I teach young people that all things are possible. If I can write a book on my smartphone, what's stopping you? Just because I grew up in a disadvantaged community doesn't mean that I'm disadvantaged. We do this by a remarkable program called the Expanded Awareness Program. This is a remarkable program that equips young people with inner strength, resilient, by teaching them critical soft skills not taught by conventional education, often not taught at home. We do job readiness training. We give them psychometric tests to assess their suitability and then contact the local business to find voluntary work experience in restaurant, property investors, and so on. We have entrepreneurship program. We run monthly seminars where the best businessmen in Durban to mentor our leaders about how to run a business. Youth with a Brighter Future has touched more than 12,000 young people this year alone with no budget, no transport. We also help inmates deal with their past, facilitate a reconciliation with their victims. This has not always been easy. But I have noticed that once an inmate has come to forgive himself or herself, to deal with his or her past conflict, he is able to let go and forgive other people. And the process of reconciliation begins. One of the amazing things is that through our prison program, we have mentored 1,000 130 inmates, and one of them is now a property investor, and only 3 have returned to prison. And I'm proud to say most of them have found peace. In all of this, I've learned that peace is not the absence of war, but it's the presence of love. Young people who can learn to kill each other, hate one another, they can also learn to love, because love comes much more natural. This One Young World community is the one of peace and love. It all begins with you. So go back home to your community. Encourage the young people to tell their story. Help them let go of the past and move forward with their life. Thank you.
Well, I just said a little prayer to myself because I hope I can do this fully and properly. When I went backstage this morning and I saw Yumi in this beautiful gown, I thought I should have dressed a bit better today. But I'm wearing green trousers in acknowledgement of Ireland, in solidarity with its very long struggle and victory for independence. More widely, though, with the knowledge that in a few days from now, the world will be coming together to remember 25 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall. And also knowing that the first time I saw Yumi was on this stage a couple of nights ago at the opening ceremony, and she was carrying the flag of her country, North Korea. And the way that she just paused a little bit so that her friend carrying the South Korean flag could catch up with her, and just for a moment. And just for a moment here in Dublin, which has taught the world so much about home rule, maybe one day your countries can be reunited again. Well, Yumi was born in the countryside outside of Pyongyang, and life, of course, is very difficult, as it was and is for millions of people in her country. But life, as her family knew it, came to a complete stop when her father was arrested and sentenced to 17 years in prison. He was a civil servant, but he'd also been running a sideline business in the illegal trade of selling metals across the border to China, gold, silver, and nickel. When he got put into prison, of course, he was classed as a criminal, but then again, so were his family on the outside of those prison walls. In her country, when someone is sent to prison, that marks the next 3 generations. So not only her father and her mother, but her herself, and one day, your children. And of course, with that, it became very, very difficult. Her mother was then interrogated for 3 years, taken away as well. I asked her, where did you live? And she said, with my sister. I said, well, how old is your sister? And she said, well, her sister was 11. So she was 9 years old, her sister was 11, and they survived by going up into the mountains and picking the grass and the flowers for their food. I said, were other people there as well? And they said, yes. And I said, did they help you? And they said, everyone's just trying to survive for themselves. Eventually, 3 years later, her mother was released, and shortly after that, her father managed to bribe himself out of prison because he needed treatment also for his colon cancer. And very shortly afterwards, as a family, and that's beautiful, that there was still immense trust in a society where there was so much distrust, they decided to try and escape. Yumi was in hospital having her appendix removed when her sister suddenly disappeared. She had taken that decision with a friend to leave, and they hadn't told anybody. And when she came out, they were so scared, the 3 remaining members of the family, that Yumi and her mother then went to try and find her. The journey into China took only a day, but it meant crossing 3 mountains and a frozen river that the whole time they were walking across, they thought would give way at any time. When they got to the other side of the border, they found an ethnic Korean man who told them that their sister had gone on ahead, but he didn't know where she was. try to go back, but then he said, if you go back, you're going to be arrested. So they made that decision to stay. He then threatened to call the police, and he wanted to rape Yumi, and her mother protected her. She said, how could you do this to a 13-year-old girl? And he said, well, they're 11, 12, 13, it's all the same. So to get themselves out of that situation, your mum offered herself, and her mother was raped in front of her. I think it's going to be easier for me than for you. And then you found yourselves outside in China, and your father managed to find his way to you eventually as well. And after that, while you're living in China, your father passed away from his colon cancer. And at 3 a.m. in the middle of the morning one day, you went off to go and bury him. You said you couldn't tell your friends, and you couldn't ask for help. I remember what it was like for me last year, so I know how you feel. And you buried him, and after that, you and your mother, and you still haven't found your sister, of course, decided to find your way out. You went to Mongolia, you crossed the Gobi Desert. You were put into prison there for 3 months. You used small knives in front of the Mongolian guards and threatened suicide so that they wouldn't send you back to where you'd come from. And through that, eventually, you found yourselves wearing prison clothes, coming off a plane in South Korea, and I think that was 2009, sorry. And you got to South Korea, and you've managed to catch up with your education in that time. Your mother continues to work in restaurants, washing dishes, to try and find some money so that you can live. And you've started cultivating this activist voice. And I know that it's still a very, very new voice, only in the last couple of months. And I asked you where you learnt your English, and you said that you've been watching all the seasons of Friends. Seasons 1 to 10, you said that you went on YouTube to watch my videos as well. And it was very, very humbling, but I do have to tell you that between Friends and me, you're going to end up with a very wonky accent after a while. So that's probably not a good idea. And I know that on behalf of Kate and David and One Young World, we're so happy and so honored that you could be with us here. I know that the South Korean police have told you that this isn't a good idea for you to come, for you to go anywhere, that they can't protect you, but that you are on the outside right now, and that things are okay. And I also wanted to say on behalf of everybody, because you didn't get a chance to celebrate it properly, but a couple of days ago you turned 21, so happy birthday. So of all the great honors I've been blessed with in my life to be able to do and to be able to be a small part of, I just wanted to ask everybody to welcome you.
I have to do do this because this is not I'm speaking. This is the people who want to tell the world what they want to say. North Korea is an unimaginable country. There is only one channel on TV. There is no internet. We aren't free to sing, say, wear, or think what we want. North Korea is the only country in the world that executes people for making unauthorized international phone calls. North Koreans are being terrorized today. When I was growing up in North Korea, I never saw anything about love stories between men and women. No books, no songs, no press, no movies about love stories. There is no Romeo and Juliet. Every story was propaganda to brainwash us about the Kim dictators. I was born in 1993. And I was abducted at birth, even before I knew the words freedom or human rights. North Koreans are desperately seeking and dying for freedom at this moment. When I was 9 years old, I saw my friend's mother publicly executed. Her crime, watching a Hollywood movie. Expressing doubt about the greatness of the regime can get 3 generations of a family imprisoned or executed. When I was 4 years old, I was warned by my mother not to even whisper. The birds and mice couldn't hear me. I admitted I thought the North Korean dictator could read my mind. My father died in China after we escaped North Korea. And I had to bury him at 3 a.m. in secret. I was 14 years old. I couldn't even cry. I was afraid to be sent back to North Korea. The day I escaped North Korea, I saw my mother raped. The rapist was a Chinese broker. He targeted me. I was 13 years old. There is a saying in North Korea, women are weak, but mothers are strong. My mother allowed herself to be raped in order to protect me. North Korean refugees, about 300,000, are vulnerable in China. 70% of North Korean and teenage girls are being victimized, sometimes sold for as little as $200. We walked across the Gobi Desert, following a compass. When they stopped working, we followed the stars to freedom. I felt only the stars were with us. Mongolia was our freedom moment. Death or dignity. Armed with knives, we were prepared to kill ourselves if we were going to be sent back to North Korea. We wanted to live as humans. People often ask me, how can we help North Koreans? There are many ways, but I would like to mention 3 for now. 1, educate yourself so you can raise awareness about human crisis in North Korea. 2, help and support North Korean refugees who are trying to escape to freedom. 3. Petition China stop repatriation. We have to shed a light on the darkest place in the world. It isn't just North Korean human rights. It's our rights that North Korean dictators have violated for 7 decades. We need governments all around the world to put more pressure on China to stop repatriation. In particular, Chinese delegates of One Young World can play a part by speaking up. North Korea is indescribable. No humans deserve to be oppressed just because of their birthplace. We need to focus less on the regime and more on the people who are being forgotten. One Young World, we are the ones who will make them visible. Fellow delegates, please join me as we make this a global movement to free North Koreans. When I was crossing the Gobi Desert, scared of dying, I thought nobody in this world cared. It seemed that only the stars were with me. But you have listened to my story. You have cared. Thank you very much.
We're not going to go to the floor. Can you get it?
Darling girl. Will you lead them or lead the delegates and councillors off? We're not going to the floor, okay?
Okay.
We're not going to the floor. Will you lead your...
Let's give a huge round of applause for an amazing session. Thank you so much. Oh.